Come on guys, Ape here, and today this video is going to be a little bit controversial because of my stance, but I want to talk about Sony and Sony CEO, Sony PlayStation CEO's recent comments about PlayStation games on Steam and PC and why it's a little bit ludicrous. But if they do it this way, that I hope they can provide some other games from their catalog whilst we wait for these games. But as you know, PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan made a statement saying, "Hey, we're going to bring games to PC 2 to 3 years after their PlayStation launch, which is acceptable to fans according to Jim Ryan." Now, I don't speak for everyone who uses Steam and Steam Decks and whatnot when I say this, but I kind of feel like that's kind of whatever. I don't really care. There's so many games on Steam. It doesn't really matter to me if I've got to wait a few years to play these, because obviously I've got a huge backlog. I've got 150 plus games on Steam in my library, so it gives me time to work my way through some of them. But I will say, it is a little disappointing that they would say such a thing, especially considering that they've got some of the biggest game franchises in the world, some of the most well-known IPs as well. So that's a bit of a yikes. But I digress. So what am I doing? Why am I making this video? Well, I want to kind of talk about some games that I feel like Sony could throw up on Steam whilst we wait, obviously. Because you don't know, Sony has such a huge library of games. They've been in gaming since 1994. They've made many acquisitions. They currently sit around 16, 17 game studios. They're currently raising funds to acquire more. Plus, they've got libraries of games that don't no longer exist, like Psyonix. So what could they do? What could they do? Well, personally, there's a few games that I would like to see. One of them being Freedom Wars. Freedom Wars, it was a PS Vita exclusive game, 2014. One of the most amazing action games of that year. But it was so underrated because it was only on PS Vita. It's sad. It's sad that game's not been re-released on PlayStation. It's sad it's not got a PC port. Personally, I feel like that game would be brought up to how back when it comes out. The game series, obviously, the Jak and Daxter series. Jak and Daxter was huge on PlayStation 2. I'm surprised Sony hasn't re-released the games on PS4 and PS5 yet. But also, I feel like porting those games to PC, as well as the PSP exclusive Daxter game, would be a huge win for gamers. Especially gamers that are obviously trying to expand into gaming, and they want to see what's on offer, especially when it comes to what Sony is capable of. Likewise, the Little Big Planet games would be another good example. They've got Sackboy's Big Adventure on Steam, but the other Little Big Planet games, which I think is a bit of a downside, they should have it all from there. I also feel like Ape Escape would also be a great little addition. Ape Escape being a PS1 series that obviously Sony started with. It's fun little game. Obviously, it's running on a PlayStation emulator, so very easy to port over to PC. Very easy to do, especially if Nixie Software is doing it, which is a studio within PlayStation Studios who is dedicated to PC ports. I also feel that the PSP game Lococo would be a great little game and its sequel to port over, just because they're fun, silly little games. They're small games. They're not major draw to a lot of players, but obviously when it comes to Steam, if people can see the breadth of the sort of games that you publish and you make, that might build interest in your other games, because people are like, oh, they made God of War, they've also made this little puzzle platformer game. Let's see what else they make. Many game publishers like Nintendo get around, not because all their games are the same genre, because they have such a variety of games in different genres that appeal to a different audience. What's this been? Wow. So Twisted Metal is another game series that I'd love to see Sony bring over. Twisted Metal being a car combat game from the PS1 era, and obviously they released games on many systems up until the PS3, and then they just kind of stopped. There wasn't a PS4 game, and it's not a PS5 game, and there wasn't a Vita game, so that's a little disappointing. Also, Killzone is another one that I'd love to see. Killzone, being basically their answer to Call of Duty back in the day. Imagine having Killzone come back on PlayStation as well, but also have the games ported to Steam, the legacy games, showing people that, hey, Sony is capable of making a good first-person shooter series, so they could do it, especially with Bungie now as part of Sony as well, which is really interesting. I also think it's a little bit annoying that Sony's obviously saying 2 to 3 years for their games, and they still haven't released Ratchet and Clank or a new one on Steam, or any of the legacy ones. That's such a downside to me, because obviously, for those who don't know, Microsoft, obviously Xbox and whatnot, they publish games on Steam day and date. but they also have a bunch of their legacy games on Steam as well. And in some cases, like Age of Empires 4 came to Steam before it came to Xbox. So yeah, that's just my opinions. I feel like Sony needs to, obviously, if they want to make the money off in the PC market, they're gonna need to bring more of their games to the PC market, and not just their like big AAA games like God of War. They're gonna need to bring some of their more niche, smaller projects to Steam as well, make them more Steam Deck verified, obviously, and that will be a huge win for PC gamers, and that will obviously get PC gamers on Sony's side. They're like, hey, give us games. Sony could give them some decent games as well from like what 7 different console libraries that they have, because obviously they've got their core 5 main PlayStation consoles, which they've obviously released over the last 25 years. Then you've also got PSP and PS Vita games that they could bring over with emulators and whatnot. Yeah, I feel like Sony could easily win. I feel like Sony could easily dominate the PC market if they use their legacy games as well. Because not being funny, they do have the breadth of IPs and the breadth of franchises that they could utilize. They just need to utilize them on the right platform, and Steam's an obvious platform to do it on, and they've got the money to do it, so why not? Yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you didn't, make sure to subscribe, like, share, comment, turn notifications. I've been Eve Kid, and signing out. Peace.